99 FM, your inspiration station. This is Script, and you're still tuned into the remix edition of The Pulse. I know you've been expecting Sibo this whole week, but like I said, I'm here to shake the feathers, shake the tables, remix the show a little bit, and give you guys some love as well. It's time now for Wealth Talks, and in some cases it's exciting conversations, some cases it's nerve-wracking conversations, but it's conversations that need to be had regardless. Especially at a time like this. Right now, the minister is having the budget speech this afternoon as we speak, actually. So I think it's quite the conversation to be had, and what a time to have it. And with me in studio today is Eric van Zyl from IJG, and we're going to be just chatting all things wealth. Eric, thank you for joining me.
Yeah, thanks, Script. Thanks for having me. Glad to be here. Yeah. Hello to everybody listening.
Yeah, good afternoon, and welcome to The Pulse. Let's get into it. Like I said, the minister's speech isn't quite done yet as we speak, but from what we've gathered so far, do you feel, or rather, what's your take on people's response to these kind of speeches? I want to start there because I know a lot of people tune in, but there's a lot of people that wait for reactions and a lot of that afterwards. What's your take on just the interest that people have right now?
Yes, yeah. So we're still waiting on the nitty-gritty of the speech, as you said. The minister's still speaking there, but I think it's quite difficult to translate something like a budget speech just to everybody's daily life, and that's obviously some of what we try to do. So we do a relatively in-depth analysis on what exactly is happening in government's finances, but at the end of the day, government works for the people, right? So how they spend their money, that touches you and me, and obviously then important subjects like how much is being spent on health, especially during times like this, COVID. Education, obviously, that has to do with the long-term future of the country. So you want to make sure that enough money is being spent in the right areas, so that we put in as tax revenue actually comes back to the country and benefits the country in the long term. Yeah.
And just speaking on tax, more income for the government obviously means more taxes from the people. There's a direct correlation there. Can we expect higher taxes if you look at the budgeted tax revenue?
Yeah, so that is actually an interesting question, because government is actually receiving less tax revenue this year, always expecting to receive less tax revenue in the 2021-22 year. So that runs from April through to March next year. So we're expecting to receive less, or government's expecting to receive less. That's mainly off the back of customs and excise taxes, which are expected to be down. So those get collected for the Southern African Customs Union and then get distributed among the member nations, and we will be receiving slightly less tax there than what we received last year. Last year was obviously quite a good year. Of some concern is that not only are we expecting less from this source of tax revenue, we're expecting less next year again as well, so in the 2022-23 year. But as far as personal and company tax is concerned, the minister has in his speech noted that they are considering dropping non-mining company tax rates, so that's positive. We saw that being mentioned in the South African speech a couple of weeks ago, so that's quite positive. On the personal income tax side of things, I didn't pick up any changes to the income tax brackets, which means that our income tax brackets haven't been adjusted for inflation since I think it is 2013. So which means that the average Namibian is probably paying a higher proportion of their salary on income tax than what they should have been. These tax brackets should actually ideally be adjusted every few years, taking inflation into account, so that you raise the lower limit of that of the income tax bracket, which effectively helps your most vulnerable Namibian, or your lowest earning Namibian, just to get a little bit more of his money in his pocket before some of that goes to government.
Yeah. Just let's talk expenses. You briefly mentioned obviously just where money goes and how important it is for the budgets to be allocated to certain ministries, in this case, for the service provision. But where do you think government will spend most of its money? I mean, we're in a pandemic, so most people are going to be looking at health and looking at that and saying we need to make sure that the health infrastructure and everything, in case we are hit with another pandemic, or we are hit with, or the health sector is hit again with something completely new. But where do you think more of the money will go?
Social sectors do get the bulk of the budget allocation. I think it's around 53%. So over 50% of the 67.9 billion expenditure profile goes to these sectors, which is primarily education, higher education, and then healthcare. Gender equality, poverty eradication also gets quite a large allocation. So in terms of the funds going to healthcare, the minister noted about $8.1 billion is going to healthcare, 13.8 billion going to education, an additional 3.1 to higher education, so that's to your NUSTs and UNAMs. And then gender equality and poverty eradication also receives 5.4 billion, so quite a generous allocation of the total expenditure profile going towards these social sectors. And then, the flip side of that is that less is being spent on the development budget side. So government typically tends to target around 20% of expenditure going towards development, and we're looking closer to 10% at the moment. So under 7 billion going towards expanding the infrastructure and the productive capacity of the country, which obviously has quite a long-term impact on future tax revenues.
Yeah, and that cut is quite significant, almost double, pretty much.
Exactly.
That sector. It's quite. Now, from all of these projections, Eric, and giving in mind that we're all coming from, or really in, the economic tough times of this age and really this year, these past 2 years, do you think that the ministry has done a good job in dealing with the challenge of balancing the Namibian books at a time like this?
Yeah, so maybe from the outset I've got to say that we haven't seen the actual allocations to projects, to smaller projects. So I've been through the speech quickly. What I will say is that Namibia's been in a tough economic space for the last 5 years. So the economy was overheating and really pumping between 2010 and 2015, and that slowed significantly to effectively a stall between 2016 and the present moment. On top of that, we've been hit by COVID, right? So we've really seen a very stagnant economic environment, which means tax revenues aren't growing as what they were forecast to during the good times. It's been difficult to rein in expenditure, and all of that means that we've been running budget deficits, quite large budget deficits for the last 5 years, and obviously that needs to be funded, and that has resulted in quite a large debt burden that we are carrying now as a country. So in terms of whether this particular budget toes that line between government not being an additional drag on economic activity, so government maintaining expenditure, and then the debt side of things running out of control to unsustainable levels. It's quite difficult to say. We would have liked to see more allocation towards development, so increasing the productive capacity of the country. Obviously, we're in COVID times, so quite a lot of money has to be spent on providing some sort of relief just to sustain activity in the country as well. So it's a really fine line that's being walked at the moment, and it's very difficult. And because of the inflexibility in the overall expenditure profile, it'll take a long-term outlook and a number of years to get to a sustainable trajectory again. So at the moment, I think we're still towing that line. It's still a very difficult situation, but government has maintained its expenditure ceiling for the current year and for the coming years, more or less where it was, which is positive. So we're not raising expenditure. Now we've got to hope that revenue comes through stronger than what we expect, just to make sure that we don't get ourselves into an unsustainable debt situation, into a debt trap. We are towing that line very, very closely at the moment.
Yeah, and like you said very well, the worst case scenario is the uncontrollable debt, or the debt you just really won't be able to recover from down the line. And definitely difficult times, but like I said in the very beginning, conversations that need to be had. And we just thank you for joining us and really having the wealth talk, and really just taking a look at the minister's speech a little bit, and breaking down into the normal layman's how exactly the money is being spent, and helping us just understand what it really means. Because again, not everybody, like I said before, and that's the reason I asked, do you feel people really sit and watch? And sometimes it's hard to really understand what the minister is saying by A, B, C, D, or E, and just the way that you've put everything really helps me personally understand also, okay, this is what this means, this is what that means. And these are conversations that definitely do need to be had. So we thank you so much for joining us, and we look forward to sitting down with you again come this time next year, hopefully.
Yeah, thanks. Well, I mean, I think the next update to the budget is probably going to take place in October.
Yeah.
So hopefully we'll see you then.
See you then. Thank you so much. That is, in case you're wondering, that is Eric van Zyl from IJG.